So we are now ready to start. Today we are reading A Gracious Space Winter. I figured out how to turn the camera around. A Gracious Space Winter, day 28. And today's topic is near and dear to my heart, the top 10 myths about writing. I am going to help you think about writing in a fresh way. Ready? Here we go. Number 1, writing is entirely different than speech. Is it? But is it? Not so. Speech is the source of voice. Writing voice comes from being in touch with how the writer generates language and insight. These are first experienced in speech and then modified and expanded for writing. Valuing speech, even jotting some of it down for your fledgling writers, helps kids learn to value their thought lives, which in turn helps them to know what should be on the page screen. Tell your kids that what is in their heads, what they might say aloud, is what you want to see on their papers. Once it's there, you can mess with it. Number 2, the second myth in the top 10 myths about writing. Formats help kids know what and how to write. Nope. Formats act like straitjackets. They tell children too quickly what can't be included. Formats require a well-planned outline and the ability to hold sequence and detail in the mind before writing anything at all. Use formats following a period of free writing and revising. Revising the content to make it pop or feel more complete. Then the sentences can be rearranged to suit a format. But start with freedom and revise to format. Never start with format. Number 3, the third myth in the top 10 myths about writing. Write every day. Have you guys heard that one? It's the most common myth known to writing everywhere. My revision of this idea is interact with writing every day. Some days read it. Some days have the kids copy it in their own hand. Some days use bits of dictation or play with words. Some days play a word game. Some days revise a draft. Some days edit a revised draft. And of course, on some days, have them write from scratch. It's exhausting to come up with original thought through original language every single day. Don't require that of your kids. Engage language every day, and they'll be just fine. Number 4 in the list of 10 myths about writing. Imitate the masters. Imitation is challenging for 4th graders and 12-year-olds and grown-ups. The pressure to outdo Aesop is unnecessary. Read the masters. Use their quotable quotes for copywork and dictation. Allow their writing styles to naturally infiltrate your kids' writing. Tell them to avoid deliberately trying to write like their favorites, except for fun, fan fiction, or as a language play tool. You want your children to sound like themselves in their writing, but you don't mind if they pick up a bit of J.K. Rowling's accent or a little E.B. White on the side. Number 5, use a thesaurus to enhance the vocabulary in a piece. Have y'all heard that myth? Please don't do this for more than a word or two. Best to use the thesaurus when you are trying to replace a term that repeats itself. In other words, if you keep saying the same word over and over, a thesaurus can help you jump out of that habit into some new language. Instead, when you see a word that is weak, consider helping your child to drop that word and write an entirely new sentence. Add detail, include an experience, expand the idea, and create an analogy. Weak writing is not improved by better vocabulary. It is improved by more writing, drilling deeper, thinking more thoughtfully. Number 6 in the list of the top 10 writing myths. Adverbs play. Let's try that again. Number 6. Adverbs add a layer of sophistication, especially ly words. Nope. The best stylists advise removing every word that ends in ly. Did you know that? The use of adverbs is seen as lazy writing. For instance, instantly she jumped from her seat. The jumping is already an expression of instantaneous action. Delete the adverb, add power. She jumped from her seat. In academic writing, ly words can be covers for an explanation of the fact. The study positively shows the effects of the drug. Better to make it clear, are the effects positive or is the study reliable? The study shows that the effects of the drug are positive when taken with X, Y, and Z, or the study showcases the effects of the drug by using hard data, not only anecdotes. That brings clarity. To review, weed out adverbs to enhance the power of your child's writing. Ask, what do you want to say with this adverb? Then say it. Number 7, in the top 10 myths about writing. There is no place for I, the first person, in academic writing. Not so. Ever since the revolution of postmodernity in the academy, the humanities in particular allow writers to indicate their social location, to explain who they are and how they relate to the topic for writing if relevant. It is commonly understood today that writers bring bias and personal experience to their research. It's important to be explicit about how these biases and experiences impact the writer's position. The use of I is limited to writing about personal experience, not used for I think or I believe writing. In other words, you can use the first person if you use it in a judicious way. Number 8 in the list of the top 10 writing myths. If you paraphrase, you don't have to cite where the idea comes from. Reverse that sentence. Paraphrasing requires citation just like direct quotes require citation. Always give credit. You can't overdo it. Number 9 in the top 10 list of myths about writing. To grow as a writer, start your day by journaling. Journaling is not necessary for growth in writing. Writing is. Any kind of writing. Facebook, Twitter, texting, papers, stories, and journaling. The only people who should keep a journal are those who wish to. Journaling need not be done in the morning either. What's happened in the day to write about by 9 a.m.? Journaling before bed is a nicer time to record the day's thoughts. Journaling only about special occasions or when life is painful is equally valid to the daily diary. Let journaling be the individual's choice. And finally, number 10 on the list of the top 10 myths about writing is do not help your child write. That's a myth. This is my favorite myth to bust. No child learned to speak in isolation or without scripts given to that child to repeat. Likewise, it is entirely too challenging for children to go from barely reading and handwriting to transcribing their own thoughts all the time. It's perfectly fine for you to jot things down for them or to dictate their own words back to them as they handwrite, or for the final product to be a mixture of your words and theirs. This is how every other practice in a child's life happens. You help until they can do it alone. Writing works the same way. Go forth and support good writing practices. Quote of the day. When I was a kid and got stuck writing essays, my mom would say, "Just tell me what you want to say." Then she would transcribe it while I talked. Suddenly, I had a rough draft. Sarah Leonard Lancaster, what a great mom she had. Sustaining thought. Encourage your kids to express themselves, but offer help with transcription until they can write on their own. That was day 28 from A Gracious Space Winter, the top 10 myths about writing. If you feel these myths are interesting and helpful to you and you'd like to share them, you can use the share button on Facebook to help this broadcast reach more people. I appreciate it when you do. So let's look at these in review one more time. Number one, the first myth was writing is entirely different from speech. Actually, writing is just speech on paper. And over time, we cultivate a writing voice the same way we cultivate a speaking voice. When your babies start out babbling, saying, me, ma, ma, ba, ba, da, da, we don't say, well, that's not really speaking. We recognize it as the beginning stages of speech. Over time, they cultivate a speaking voice. They learn to shape the words, to conjugate the verbs, to say what they mean. Writing works the same way. You start out with babbling speech on paper. And over time, with the influence of reading and editing and revision, they grow a specific style of writing voice. It works the same way. But you always start from the language your kids have already mastered, which is spoken language. Number two, formats help kids know what and how to write. That is a dyed-in-the-wool belief of educators, and here's why. They keep thinking the reason kids can't write is they don't know what to do. But that's not it. What kids need is permission to express their evolving ideas without restriction. They don't need to know what the format is. They need to know how to grab the language from the inside and get it out of their mouths. They need good self-interrogation skills. They need to be able to ask themselves the kind of questions that draw language from their insides and get that to the page. Formats actually shut that down. If we tell children six sentences makes a paragraph, your child is now in math brain thinking about how to communicate a few ideas in 6 sentences. They're not actually exploring the idea. What we want first is the exploration of the idea in as much language and writing as they can, even stopping and starting and backing up and adding detail. And then if they really only need 6 sentences for some final product, how about picking the 6 best out of that big mess on the page? Formats are for shaping the writing. They are not for creating the writing. Let me say that again. Formats are for shaping the writing, not for creating the writing. You always start with freedom of expression when you're beginning to write. Number 3, not all writers write every day. Even though everyone says to become a good writer, you should write every day, and people tell you to keep morning pages, and they talk about how professional writers schedule a block of time every day for original writing. Your kids are not professional writers. Your kids are learning to write. And one of the ways they grow in their writing skills is to read writing. It's to take breaks from original writing. It's to revise and edit. It's to do a little copy work and dictation. Even as a pro, and even though I write every day, I do not always do original writing that's going to be published that needs revision. Even when I'm working on a book, there are some days where all I do is tinker for an entire day. I just play with what's already there, and I move a sentence here and there, and I change a word, and I reorganize paragraphs because my mind needs a rest from creation and instead is engaged in development. Likewise, there are days when the best thing you can do for a writer who is blocked is to stop writing. Take a walk, watch a movie, have a conversation, get away from it so that the interior of your mind can work on the writing invisibly to you. And when you return, you have fresh eyes, fresh energy, fresh perspective. The 4th myth is imitating the masters. That seems to be so popular in homeschooling. Well, if we just copy somebody who's a great writer, my child will learn. The masters are there to be admired, dissected, appreciated. We can analyze them for what created the power in their writing. But imitation is not the necessary step. Internalizing what that writer does well is awesome. For example, in the Arrow and Boomerang products, in our tools for language arts, we will pick a novel per month and identify literary elements throughout. Our hope is that our students will see this literary device in action, they'll understand it, and then they'll play with it in their own writing. And in the Arrow level, we literally give you a writing activity to explore that literary device so that your child could use the device, not imitate the author. Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying? In other words, we don't imitate LeBron James to become a great basketball player. We watch LeBron James, we learn about his great passing skills, and then we work on passing. We don't say, well, now go out and be like LeBron James. Can you imagine how intimidating that would be in basketball? And that's true in writing. It's not imitation. It's admiring, understanding, examining, and then practicing some of those skills. So that's what I'm talking about. Fifth, using a thesaurus. It's overused. Thesauruses are great for me in what Nancy Graham, our staff member, calls divergent thinking. You know when you get stuck on a train of thought and you can't get out of your own brain? Use a thesaurus to introduce a whole bunch of new ways of thinking about the topic. So you have a word like treasure, and you're thinking, well, how else can we talk about treasure? And then you go to a thesaurus, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of ideas that are other words that seem like treasure. And now you can even explore how those change the way you understand the word treasure in your writing. That's when a thesaurus is valuable. It is not valuable when a child writes, the roller coaster was awesome. Just changing awesome to stupendous doesn't improve that sentence. What improves that sentence is drilling down into the word awesome and asking questions like, how was it awesome? What was awesome about it? The speed, the height, the loop-de-loop, sitting with your friend, screaming, throwing up. Like, let's look at awesome and examine it more deeply. Yes, the Friends episode where Joey uses the thesaurus is my hands-down favorite example of why a thesaurus is ridiculous, and it is also super fun. Oh my gosh, I was just thinking of your aortic pump instead of your heart. Hilarious. Okay, number 6, adverbs seen as adding a layer of sophistication. So many of you know the language of dress-ups or adverbs, and we use them because it sounds like a more complex sentence structure. There are places for the judicious use of adverbs, but in every style guide as a professional writer that I've ever been a part of, it asks you to eliminate adverbs. The writing is more immediate and more direct when you just say what you mean, rather than trying to manipulate the reader into feeling what you hope they'll feel. Patiently, she waited. How about she waited? How about she waited for 6 hours without a glass of water? How about she waited for 6 hours without a glass of water and never moved? Now we're getting somewhere. There's a picture in my head. She waited patiently, I just go right by it. It doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't invite me in. Adverbs have a way of directing how you're supposed to interpret the sentence rather than showing you what could be revealed and created as a picture in your own mind. Number 7, there is no place for I in academic writing. So let me talk about that one because adults my age and a little bit younger are used to being in college where everything was supposed to be objective. Now, in the hard sciences, yeah, you're not going to tell your personal experience. You're not going to say, I was sipping my tea while I looked over the research, and I was thinking about the fact that, no, you're not going to do that. But in the humanities in particular, and in the social sciences, there is some room for that. Because amazingly, being a middle-aged white woman in a middle-class home at age 55, that colors how I read the data, the novel, the books, the other experts. And opening that to the reader helps them know where I'm coming from when I give my interpretation. There is room for dialogue between the writer and the information. Every professor is a little different, but literally in grad school, in many of my classes, I had to do a weekly reflection paper on the reading. And they told us they wanted us to use first-person narrative, and some students wouldn't do it. They had been so conditioned to think that wasn't acceptable. It's absolutely acceptable, and there are specific places in the academy where that kind of writing is important. Even the ACT and SAT allow for first person. So I want you to remember that because it's a really important one. It's a holdover from a pre-postmodern way of thinking about academic writing. Paraphrasing, number 8, always requires a citation, just like it was a quote. Number 9, you don't have to keep a daily diary or journal to be a good writer. And number 10, the myth that you should not help your child write is a myth. I want you to think back to when you were helping your child learn to speak. What did you say? Your child would say something like, "Me want Nana." And you would think, wow, brilliant child, I know what she means. But then you might say to her, "Did you mean to say, I want a banana?" And she might parrot back, "I want Nana." Is she still speaking from an authentic place, or is she just imitating you and doesn't know what she's saying? No, she knows what she's saying. She's just saying it a little more clearly now, a little more grammatically correct for speech. The same is true in writing. There is a stage where when you are working with your child writer, the product is kind of a mishmash of your offerings and the child's self-expression. And your job is to support that as much as you can and then slowly back out of the writing as the child gains confidence and fluency, just like you did in speech. And you know how you sometimes overstep your line in speech? You've got a 14-year-old and you start scripting how they should talk to grandma, and your 14-year-old's like, "Mom, I got this." And she shuts you down. That's what'll happen in writing. Your child will be like, "Mom, I don't want your word. I want my word." That's a good moment. But what you've done up to that point is you have modeled how we grab the language that's inside, how we get that out. Does that make sense? You hear what I'm saying? So the top 10 writing myths are day 28 in the winter copy of A Gracious Space. And if those seem important for you, you might want to pick up a copy so that you can review them on your own. Do we have any questions from those of you who have just joined me now? And I see many of you have joined this morning. It's so great to see you. While I'm waiting for those questions, because it takes a moment on Facebook, I will say this. We will be reading Spring in April. I love it when you leave us reviews on Amazon. Reviews are the way we help other people discover Brave Writer. It's what you can do for me, since I do live broadcasts and podcasts for you as a gift. So if you want to give back, that's the way to do it. We also are selling the Poetry Tea Time Companion. And in April, it is National Poetry Month. In the Homeschool Alliance, my coaching community, we are going to spend the whole month learning about poetry. I'm going to teach you how to read it, how to analyze it, how to enjoy it, how to write it. If you are not a part of our coaching community, go to CoachJulieBogart.com. Sign up for April. We will be looking at poems together and having great, big, juicy conversations around poetry. This is a fabulous tool for you to use in your poetry tea time lifestyle with your kids. Finally, the last thing I want to share is that today we released episode 7 of the Brave Writer Lifestyle Podcast. We interviewed Amy Milsick, Rock Your Homeschool, and she is fantastic, has 5 boys, is a self-care guru. She's fabulous. And I really hope that you will go listen to that podcast today because she's fabulous. You can go to iTunes or Stitcher. It's located in both places. The name of the podcast is A Brave Writer's Life in Brief. Or you can just look up Julie Bogart or Brave Writer Podcast, and it should come right up for you. Leave us a review there too. I was trying to get to 50 reviews by the end of March. We're at 37. So if you could help me out in hitting that goal, you would have my earnest gratitude. Thank you so much. So let's see. I'm going to now see if we've got some questions to answer. It's good to see everybody just making great comments. I have journals that go all the way back to 4th grade. Boxes of them. They've followed me around the world in every location I've lived in. I do reread my own writing, kind of on a weirdly regular basis, several times a year. I love seeing the evolution of my personality, my insights, what was important to me, what troubled me. I love that I used that space to write. It is hands down the worst writing I do. My journal voice is whiny. It is not naturally insightful. It isn't even well punctuated or spelled, especially between fourth grade and about age 18. My journal is the one place I show up consistently as a non-writer. Isn't that amazing? In my writing life. I love to write, and I can craft what I need to write for publication to be really polished and beautiful. But when I journal, there is no such pressure. So I sound like me, exploring my thoughts before those thoughts have taken full shape. Journaling is not the key to becoming a fabulous published writer. It is a place to get comfortable with transcribing the mind and hooking it up with a hand. So don't expect to see polished insights from your kids in their journals. That's not what that space is for. That space is sort of like babbling in the crib while you're getting ready to learn to speak. And that's a great place to babble, is in your own journal. Never correct it for spelling, punctuation, and maybe don't even read it if your children don't want you to. Very important. And yet, so much great growth going on, even if your child is writing a journal. You just can't believe how much is happening. All this good stuff that's invisible to you. So trust it. All right, then. My tea is cold, as is usual, but it's in a beautiful cup. Thank you, VA homeschoolers. And I am going to rest my voice. The weekend in Virginia was incredible. In fact, I have some possible conference talks that we're slating maybe for a webinar in the summer, so we'll keep you posted about that. In the meantime, go listen to the podcast. It's amazing. Join me on Instagram at Julie Bravewriter. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining me today, everyone. Have a great day.